All right, guys, which countertop material is best for your project? This is the highest asked question I've received as a kitchen designer of over 30 years. And when I even had my radio show, same thing. This was the #1 question that people asked the most. I found this very interesting. So maybe I should have done this video a long time ago, but here we go. So I'm only going to cover 5 of the most popular materials today. And one of those materials is going to surprise you a little bit with my recommendation toward the end. However, if you also like this, I'm only going to go into 3 particular areas related to countertops. So heat resistance, scratch resistance, and cleanability. So when we get to the end though, and if you like what I'm sharing, of course, besides the subscribe and the like and the share and all that stuff, I want you to, in the comments, you can ask me for, and I'll send you a link to the guide that goes into many more factors. In fact, I'll just read you some of the other factors that I want you to consider with countertops. And this kind of surprised me how big the list is. So how about germ retention? How about repairability, cost, color options, design options, hidden seams, thickness, longevity, timeless, maintenance, applications such as different places you can use the material, and cool to the touch. So, and then just to give you a little bit of a preview on the materials, so outside of the 5 I'm going to cover, I'll just mention the others that I'm not going to cover, and then this hopefully will get you interested in getting that guide. Mostly that guide is just to give me a gauge of how well you guys are finding the value of the content, okay? So the other materials I'm not going to cover are going to be laminate, stainless steel, glass, resin, tile, paper, ironically, and epoxy, okay? All right, so let's jump into the 5 materials I'm going to cover for you today. So granite, quartz, butcher block, concrete, and solid surface. Now, some of you are saying, well, what about porcelain? Yeah, of course, porcelain's on that list of the others. So sorry, that'll be on the list of the materials I'm not going to cover today. And you might say, why? Well, because it's not nearly as popular as the others that I mentioned so far. Okay. And then the other thing is quartzite. And to be really honest with you, even though this is my field, and even though I do a lot with specifying your recommendations, I think even even well-trained professionals in the industry, maybe not ones working in countertops, but ones like me as a kitchen designer, don't really understand the big difference between quartz and quartzite. I mean, you can look it up, and I've read the definitions of them. But to be really frank with you, I think stone and then synthetic in that space, granite versus quartz. Okay, quartz, of course, synthetic. I can talk a lot more about this, and if you have questions, please toss them in the comments below, and I will answer them personally. Okay, so let's jump in. I'm going to grade these on a scale of low to high, which is exactly what I'll do in the guide or the breakdown if you guys want copies of that. So first one is granite. All right, on the heat resistance scale for granite, it is higher on the heat resistance scale. So on a scale of 1 to 5, I probably give it about a 4. Now, why don't I give it a 5? Well, here's the challenge with heat resistance is if you, in granite, let's say that you have some water that's soaked into your granite because you're making something or oil for that matter, and then you put a really hot item on that granite countertop, that can cause the moisture inside the granite that's in the pores of the granite to swell, okay? And that can then cause potential for breakage. So that's where your issues are with heat. It can, some materials can burn or discolor or warp or break. So that's what I'm kind of measuring when I'm considering heat resistance, okay? How about scratch resistance on granite? Very scratch resistant. Oftentimes it's more damage resistance than your knives that you're going to use on. You'll dull your knives before you dull the granite. Excuse me. What about cleanability? Cleanability for granite, really nice. The challenge with it is if you don't seal it, sometimes you can have those pores can catch things that you don't want it to catch and sit there, okay? And then there's more to that in my mind where that's going in the guide when it comes to germs and sustainability, okay, or other factors. Okay, how about quartz? Well, quartz on the heat resistance, very, very heat resistant. Now, quartz is taking little chunks, to make it simple, of quartz or granite, right? Quartz is like your gravel out on the road. And then it's putting resin in it to hold it all together so that it's non-porous, okay? So the resin is less heat resistant than the quartz, but the resin's really high heat resistance as well. So I'd give that a 4. I forgot to give you the ratings on the others, so forgive me. I'm so used to just kind of rolling through this. The guide will spell it out with how I grade these, okay? Scratch resistance on quartz, very high on the scratch resistance scale. And then cleanability, of course, very high because it's non-porous. All right, how about next one, butcher block. Now I have a video about a short on our channel here where I talk about the butcher block countertops in our kitchen and how much I like butcher block. I've done butcher block for dozens and dozens of projects in the past, and heat resistance, surprisingly, it is really high on the heat resistance scale. Now, it's not gonna be as high as granite. It might be like a 3. You know, a lot of people use trivets regardless of what material they have and how heat resistant it is. I think it's just a human nature thing that we do. But the nice thing about, about butcher block is you can sand it out. If for some reason you don't pay attention to that and you do leave a darkened mark from the hot pan, then you can sand that out, which is great. Okay, what about scratch resistance? Well, now here's where butcher block, it depends on the wood, but most of the woods are going to be lower on that scratch resistance scale. Some people don't care because of how beautiful the wood is and that it's designed for that purpose. That's its function, right? To cut and use and wear and tear. And sometimes even people love to have that wear and tear look to make it look authentic, okay? And then how about cleanability? Well, surprisingly, it's really easy to clean. If you do get a lot of cut marks where it leaves a lot of, shreds of the wood, if you cut enough in there, then of course, that's maybe not gonna be as easy to clean, but it will be relatively easy to wipe down. I'll give you just a little bit of a hint of what you're gonna find in that guide that relates to this when it comes to cleanability, or not cleanability, to butcher block. That is that it for germs, surprisingly, it has enzymes in it, which is what wood has, that stay in there and active for ages. And those enzymes help to kill bacteria, which is pretty cool. You can look it up for more details just on that specifically. All right, now next is concrete. Now guys, I've done a lot with concrete over the years. Also dozens and dozens of projects in concrete countertops. It's been a little while since I've done one. The demand is not as high as it used to be, or interest, I should say, but yet it still has relevance. On the heat resistance side, very heat resistant. They're gonna put sealers on there if they do wax coatings, depends on how they coat it. That's the bigger concern for heat resistance than the concrete itself. Scratch resistance, same thing. It depends on the coating that you put on it. But great product to consider. Cleanability, yeah, again, depends on the surface. So whatever surface you put on it, if you're going to epoxy or, if you're going to put just a sealer, or if you're going to do a wax coating, each of those are going to vary in how they handle each of those things: heat, scratch, sheeting, and cleanability. Okay. All right. The last one was a little bit of a surprise, I promise you. Over my 30 years, I'll tell you what I think should come back, and which countertop material should be coming back with a vengeance. And some of these manufacturers are going to like this. And I am not paid, by the way, to share this with you, except for you watching and sharing this and getting me more subscribers. That's the only way I seek or desire right now to get paid. I guess who knows if I'll get an offer down the road by a manufacturer, right? But solid surface countertops, in my opinion, are an underrated material. Now, discussing these 3 areas I'm reviewing with you right now. Heat resistance, yeah, it's going to be probably a 3. It does really well. Oftentimes when you're doing solid surface countertops, the fabricator will cut you a cutting board out of the sink cutout, a cutting board and or trivets to use in those applications, or something that can be one and the same. Scratch resistance, yeah, they do scratch a little bit easier. I probably put that on a 2 or 3 on the scale. But of course, with Scotch-Brite pads, you can buff it out. And then cleanability, very easy to clean. It's non-porous, right? So remember, there's a lot of other factors to consider in these things that I would suggest for you to, keep in mind. And I'd recommend to say something in the comments so that I can get you that link to the guide that breaks this down on the rating of 1 to 5 for me. I've got like those 12, 15 factors of things to consider when purchasing countertops. Guys, if you like this, please subscribe, do the things you know you need to do to help out, and I sure appreciate you watching.